Greetings, everyone. The 5 ways of Aquinas come from a profound Christian contemplative tradition on the relationship between God and the created world that leads us to the transcendent Creator from his immanent creation. The first way begins with the reality of motion or change, which occurs when a potentiality is actualized. Now, since a potentiality cannot, at the same time and in the same aspect, both to be and not to be itself, it cannot be both potential and actual, that is, to actualize itself, unless it is actualized by something already actual, or an actualizer. However, if this actualizer is doing the action of actualizing the potential of something else, say the potentiality that we began with, this actualizer itself thus can be said to be in a state of motion or change also, and thus requires a further actualizer to actualize its potentiality. And this further actualizer thus in turn requires a yet even further actualizer, so on and so forth. However, even if the theory goes on to infinity, it does not really explain why are there these things with actuality and potentiality that require actualization in the first place. Unless we arrive at a pure actuality, or first cause, in the sense that he can actualize the potentiality of anything else without himself being in need of being actualized in any way, because such first cause is pure actuality without potentiality, who we call God, because since he has the perfect and unlimited actuality built in himself, he does not require a cause or creator, but is uncaused and can thus cause or create the existence of other secondary causes or creatures out of nothing, or without dependence on anything else. The second way begins with the observation that a finite instance of existence or thing cannot be the efficient or the creative agent that causes itself, because if this was so, a thing has to exist before it existed in order to cause its own existence, which is impossible. Therefore, a finite thing requires a cause other than itself. However, even an infinite number of such causally dependent causes does not really explain why such causes exist at all, unless by appealing to an uncaused cause, who can be the efficient cause or the creative agent of anything else without himself in need of an efficient cause or creative agent. And such uncaused cause is necessarily pure actuality, without potentiality needing actualization, who is thus God, the uncreated creator, or the unmoved mover. The third way begins with the observation that finite things are contingent. They can exist or not exist. Now, if it is possible for things not to exist, it is possible then at one point that nothing existed. However, if at one point nothing existed then, nothing would also exist now, since the generation and corruption of things depend on each other. However, something do exist now. Therefore, something have always existed. Yet, the contingent things themselves, even an infinite number of them, cannot fully explain why have they always existed, since they depend on other actualizers and creative agents, recalling the first and second way. Therefore, we must arrive at an uncaused cause or God, who exists necessarily by virtue of his pure actuality to explain the continued existence of contingent things. The fourth way begins with an assertion that the existing things exhibit various kinds of transcendental perfections that are convertible with their being, such as truth, which is being looked at by the intellect, and goodness, which is being or existence looked at by the will. Now, some things exhibit greater degrees of being, and thus truth and goodness, such as a virtuous person like Doctor Who, and then others, such as a vicious person like a Dalek. Now, the fact that finite things exhibit these perfections in various degrees means that they do not possess these perfections in themselves per se. They do not possess themselves by their own essence. For then, they would have all these perfections in them in a maximal way. Rather, they participate in these perfections insofar as they only possess these perfections in a limited and imperfect way, just as God creates creatures that resemble his perfections in a limited and imperfect, but nonetheless true way. As such, the varying degrees of perfections in creatures thus point to a purely actual creator, who exhibits these perfections in himself in a maximal way, who is the cause of all things that are true and good to various degrees. The fifth way begins with the observation that unconscious things, or efficient causes, the unconscious efficient causes, aim towards the manifestation of certain regular causal outcomes, or final causes, which are purposes or ends. For example, an electron can emit a photon, and it regularly does so, rather than emitting elephants. Now, unconscious things regularly generate these causal outcomes, just as the purposes and ends or final causes of a conscious person that directs his actions or her actions. As such, conscious beings act for an end, and unconscious beings also act for an end. Yet, the end of a conscious being exists in his or her intellect, which the unconscious things lack. Thus, the network of ends or final causes of the physical universe must exist in the supreme intellect that directs them. These are a brief summary of Aquinas' 5 ways, and they make excellent topics for philosophical conversation and contemplation.